Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast. My name is Chuck Rocha, and I'm coming to you live from this White Rivera in Mexico City. I need you, if you're watching on YouTube, to respect this shirt I picked up in Mexico several years ago, and I'm like, wear this shirt, then take it back to Mexico where I bought it from. But I bought it in, I can't even think of the damn name. Where's the real famous Day of the Dead celebration?
Down in Oaxaca?
Yes, Oaxaca's where I bought it.
Mm-hmm. You look
What
fantastic.
do you think about this? Does this make me a real Mexican? The real Mexican shirt?
No, but I mean, keep trying. Keep working it. We got you in Mexico. We got you in Mexico City. We got you with a guayabera on. Not quite, but you're getting close. You're getting close, and that's what's important. I love the fact that you've got this aggressive travel schedule, man. I don't know how you keep it up in the middle of the campaign cycle. I'm coming live from Sacramento, as I often do, and I'm feeling gassed. I'm feeling out of energy. So my hat's off to you, brother. I'm looking forward to getting a full report on how things are in the homeland, in the mother country when you return. And we got a few items to talk about today as we head into the last 60 days of this campaign. I can't believe we're 60 days out from this thing. Do you get the sense, because there were so many extraordinary dynamic events from the last debate? I know we're going to talk about the next debate in a second, but the first debate that kind of changed the trajectory, the attempted assassination attempt, the Democratic convention, the Republican convention, Kamala Harris becoming the nominee. It's almost like we're sliding into this final rush here of the campaign. Coming down, the tempo is coming down. Is that just me being an old guy, or are you feeling that as well?
Yeah, I think it's different in state to state. And I think that what you're saying is in fact true. But also, folks, in North Carolina, a state you love to start to talk about, get ballots in like 10 days. Like, people are already voting. This thing is happening. I know we are looking forward to this big debate that's coming up next Tuesday. But folks are already starting to get their ballots in places very soon. And I think that we talk about everything on this podcast in the terms of history. I mean, you like to reflect back to when we used to have pagers and worked off of paper. But the real fact of the matter is that we've never seen a campaign have to be thrown together in such a quick amount of time. What effect that's actually going to have? Were people really that in love with Donald Trump, or were they just like, okay, I don't like Joe Biden. Is this what we're going to do? I think everything is turned on its head, and I think history is going to be made one way or the other, but we're going to see a thing that never happened. The biggest thing, and I'll shut up, that's happened is the Republicans did not have 4 years to just beat the shit out of Kamala Harris and her record and who she is, like they did with Joe Biden. And so they can't catch up in enough time for people to actually start voting.
Yeah. And you think that if there was one human being who was predisposed to beat the hell out of somebody quickly and get away with it really quickly, would be Donald Trump doing that to Kamala Harris. But I think that people are so tired of the shtick, and they're so done with the story here. The Trump fatigue syndrome is a real thing. It's set in, and people are tired. And the more he talks, the more they realize we moved on from this. We rejected this before, and it's time to kind of get to a better place as a country. At least I'm hopeful. I say that from my own perspective and where I want the country to be. But I'm going to be honest, when I look at some of the polling numbers, we are seeing Kamala Harris in a tighter range than Hillary Clinton was, and even Joe Biden in most instances. This is looking like a very, very, very close race. And it's extremely winnable by both candidates. I think that Kamala Harris has some very distinct advantages, certainly in the money race. She's got so much money, she's handing it down to state parties and Senate parties and the Senate committees. There's not enough time to spend all of the money that she is bringing in. There's literally nowhere else to put it. So she's literally given money away. She also has go ahead,
Mike, before you go any further, it's good for the listeners to know, in case y'all didn't know, what Mike is talking about is really important, is that Kamala Harris gave the DCCC and the DSCC, the party committees that run the House and the Senate races, each $10 million. And then she gave the Democratic Governors Association $2.5 million. And then she gave like the Secretary of State's and the Attorney General's Association $1 million piece. So nobody felt left out. When's the last time all you political professionals and reporters who listen to this podcast have ever seen a politician just give their money away? I'll stop. Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
that's a great point, and it's important because one, Chuck's right. They don't just give resources away like that, but two, understand something. When you're raising money at this record clip, and she's quadrupling, quintupling records, with 60 days, you run into a point where there's literally no inventory. You literally cannot buy any more time, and there's any more space on radio or TV in certain key districts and key states. We're at that point. There's nothing else to buy. You can oversaturate online, but again, you're going to have enough resources to do that. The main takeaway here is the one thing you learn in campaigns is the most valuable asset that you have is time. It is not money. It is not experience. It's not infrastructure. It's not even the best candidate. It's time, because you need time to make adjustments. You need time to execute your plans. And what's happening is when the Harris campaign has so much money and has locked up so much inventory, they're literally every day that goes by makes it harder for Donald Trump to get his footing on driving a message forward. That's obviously, you really want to be in Kamala Harris's position there. Now, the second thing is, we're seeing that Donald Trump doesn't have the resources to compete effectively, or at least that's the way that it looks. There's certainly a lot of outside spend, but Harris has that same outside spend, even more actually. And I'm reminded, I stop myself and going, when have I ever seen a campaign in a position like this, like Donald Trump's? Well, I'll tell you exactly when. 2020. People don't remember in 2020, he ran out of cash. Remember, he ran out of money 30 days before the election because he was funneling it so much of that money into his own personal accounts that he literally ran out of money. I've seen that happen in school board races. I think I saw it happen to a dog catcher race once in 1978. I've never seen that happen in a presidential campaign. And yet there he did, and he seems to be doing it again. A lot of this, though, is not going to change the outcome of the trajectory of his race. And there's some data point in there we've got to pay attention to, telling us that money only goes so far in campaigns, certainly of this magnitude. So this race is I don't want to say it's locked in, but it's damn near close to locked in. And when both sides have all the heavy artillery firing, the infrastructure that's going to be built has been built. It's too late to build a ground game operation. You're going with what you got. If you don't got nothing, you got nothing, Donald Trump. And so these states are now, we've moved into the tactical phase of the campaigns. And I'm sorry about the ramble, but real quick, let me wrap it up on this and saying at this point now, it's just the execution phase. Whoever has what they've brought to the battlefield has what they've brought. It's going to be what it's going to be. And my suspicion is, when I'm looking at the data, this looks almost exactly like 2020. I think we're going to have a very, very close race with the same demographics breaking essentially the same way. And I don't like that Kamala Harris's polling is as tight as it is, but there are some other external factors showing that she's probably got some hidden strengths. Women, particularly new registrations, Latino voters coming online that aren't built into the voter models. Sorry about the long exegesis. There's the word for the day. That was a Mike Madrid exegesis. Go ahead, Chuck. Give me your thoughts. Tell me I'm right or tell me I'm wrong.
That's what they used to tell me in Sunday school. If I didn't show up on time, I was going to get an exegesis. But that's a whole other conversation for another day. I think it's important as folks get caught up in the Kamala momentum, and they're excited. I'm excited. Lots of folks are excited to see the first woman of color, first AAPI. Like, all the things are real. But you need to ground yourself in pragmatics. And what I mean by that is Kamala Harris realigned this campaign that Joe Biden was losing by 5 or 6 points in the battleground states. You can't sit here, and this is not what Mike's saying, you can't sit here and say that she didn't move the polls. She moved them astronomically, but they stopped right back at even. So that's what's happened here is you went from a race that was leaning Donald Trump's way in battleground states, which again, boys and girls, it's the only thing that matters. Don't talk to me about national polls. It just shows momentum. I get it. But this will be 1 in 7 states. It just clicked about 2 clicks back to the left, where now it's a wide open race, 50-50 margin of error in almost every race. New battleground polling out this morning shows Donald Trump still winning Arizona. It literally tied in Pennsylvania. her up one or two in Georgia, her up one or two in North Carolina. Again, anybody's ballgame. But Mike knows this, and I know this, which is in a race that's really close. And you have to separate the presidential race from Senate, House, and other races because it's just different. And that's where the money does matter more, is in advertising in a House race. But in thinking about where ground game does really matter and enthusiasm really matters, is that field can make up maybe 1 to 3 points. I've never really seen it make up more than 3. It's rarely more than 2. It's normally a point and a half. We're just a turnout operation. Folks like to think knocking on doors is the be all end all. It's important. It's great. It gives you that point and a half. And in this race that Mike Madrid just described, it's exactly what could be the difference when you have over 35 campaign offices in Pennsylvania open and Donald Trump only has 2. You can use that advantage to get that point, and that point to Mike's point to Mike's point, is that could be the difference. So it just reminds everybody that it's going to be close. I'm looking underneath the car at where this turnout and excitement overlaps. Again, I keep coming back to this, is these House races in California and these House races in New York City and New York State. Because if there is new energy there with Democrats, is this going to help a Rudy Salas in the Central Valley? Polling would say that there really hasn't been much change there, but there has been a change in the presidential. I can promise you that. Does that affect the House race? I don't know that. Mike Madrid don't know that. Nobody knows that until after Election Day, and that's what I'm most curious to see. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, again, I love the fact that we've entered this new phase of the campaign where the tactics are going to matter. As Chuck said, I mean, the polling now is, I don't want to say it's of limited value, but it is of limited value. And again, we're moving away from these big, large 30,000-foot looks at where Republicans feel and Democrats feel and whites, Latinos, blacks, Asians feel, to this post-convention phase where the tactics on the battlefield matter much, much more than the grand strategic vision, especially as we're looking at battleground states and as we're looking at House seats. I do because I am seeing some of these very large ticket splits, unprecedented in polling. Ruben Gallego, 15-point differential over Kerry Lake or whatever the hell it is, and Trump winning the state by 3. And a lot of the journalists are saying that's not possible. There's no such thing as a Trump Gallego voter. Bullshit. There absolutely is.
Yes, there is.
There's a lot of them.
There is.
And there's going to be a lot more than people expect. And like I said, I think that's going to defy conventional wisdom. The same thing with this Robertson character in North Carolina, this Republican who's black, Nazi, Holocaust denying, whatever he is, just a weird dude. He's going to tank. Does that mean that they're an anchor dragging down the top of the ticket? I personally believe that it is. There's a lot of political scientists will say that's not the way it works. There's no bottom down ticket race that drags down the top of the ticket. I don't think that's right. I think that a lot of these people are framing who the Republican Party is. And even if there is a point or two differential, it's going to have an impact in states like Arizona. It's going to have an impact in states like North Carolina. Abortion issues could make the Florida race down ticket anyway a lot closer in contestable races. So those are things to be watching, and it's extremely hard to discern what the down ticket impacts are. So you have to look at these larger 30,000 foot tectonic shifts when you're seeing a 10, 12, 15-point gap between a Donald Trump and a Kerry Lake in Arizona. Maybe the numbers aren't exact. They're not designed to be in a poll, but directionally, it tells you some really, really strange things are going to be happening down ticket with the way people are voting across parties.
I think it's something important that you mentioned that we haven't talked about, which is we've talked about the House effect. Let's talk about the Senate effect. Mm-hmm. The 2 most vulnerable Senate seats in America will not see $1, Mike Madrid, of presidential spending. That is Ohio and Montana. And these are both seats, for all of you kids listening, that was ran 6 years ago when there wasn't a presidential election. But when there was a presidential, they won. Democrats won in a non-presidential year. Sherrod Brown, John Tester, both really good folks from their states, independent-minded, like folks in those states love them. That's how they win in these red states. But just 2 years after that, and Mike, help me with my numbers, but I think Donald Trump won both of those states by more than 20 points. Am I wrong?
No, that's right.
And so
20? 20?
More?
In Ohio?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. We'll check.
It might have been, but I bet it was at least 20 over, almost close probably to 30 in Montana. But anyway, Donald Trump won by a lot.
Yeah.
But now you have these senators who are having to run a presidential year. This is the point I'm making, is that all of the stuff that Mike's saying about the money matters, or in other places where it's baked in, it doesn't matter. But in these Senate races where, to Mike's point, even where there's no presidential spending, it's hard to buy any more TV advertising in Billings, Montana. There's just so much advertising, and I can promise you they've been advertising there for almost a year. So what effect does that have on the U.S. Senate when you have Tester running and Sherrod Brown running in a non-presidential election in a state that Trump carried by double digits? Let's just say that at the minimum.
Trump won by 8 points in Ohio.
Wow. So almost double digits in Ohio. It was over double digits in Montana. Thanks for the quick fact check there. But the point is that it's a whole different ballgame in a presidential year. Folks show up and there's no spending except by the House. So watch these. These will tell you things where you can judge them against a race. Like, I can tell you this to back up what Mike just said. In a place like Philadelphia, where there's a Senate race, a presidential race, and overlapping House races, there's nothing else to buy. We've bought it all. It's all reserved. Even digitally, there's very, very little inventory, to Mike's point. Same thing in Phoenix, Arizona, where there's a Senate race, a presidential race, and oh my God, 2 overlapping congressional races. Take it from the guy who's trying to buy some Spanish language advertising in that for a House race where it's going, we don't have much inventory left. You can buy this stuff around the edges. That means people are seeing information nonstop or just tuning out, because when is enough, right? This is my point in strategy to our voters of when you should expand the universe and go as broad as you can with the persuasion message to Latino voters. Throw out your model of persuasion, throw out your turnout model. Use this if you have that money to go talk to a broad swath of Latinos who aren't seeing your advertising. For example, and I'll stop with Chuck Roach's tirade or whatever that word was, is my son is a 34-year-old Latino man in Pittsburgh who is a union steam fitter with 2 boys. Like that's our demographic, Democrats. Well, there's been a bazillion, that's my word, dollars spent in the Pittsburgh media market and online and under every stone in Pittsburgh for the presidential elections and the Senate races. And my son has not seen one ad. Now, he hasn't because he's not on cable TV. He don't own a TV except that's hooked through his gaming system. And he watches Netflix and other things that he will pay for a subscription not to watch advertising. So how do you reach that Latino man? Which is, I think there's a lot of other men like that, which sometimes Democrat and Republican operatives just don't think it's worth it. Right, Mike?
Yeah. How would you approach that? I mean, you're doing work in that state.
So things you can do immediately to these young Latinos, and a lot of them are what Mike talks about, these non-college educated men, Latinos who don't have T's, text a video right to their phone. Send them more mail pieces that normally they don't get mail from. Look at where streaming. The newest thing is gaming. You can buy advertising on gaming, and a lot of these boys are gaming. My son likes to game and things like that. So just think outside the regular box. We still need to do paid. I'm a big proponent. I make TV ads. I make digital ads. I make mail. It's all good. I'm just saying expand your universe, especially when everything's bought up.
These are those moments in the campaign where you got to be smart, you got to be right, you got to be effective. And I love the way you said it. You got one shot sometimes on these mediums, so you better damn well make that shot count, because you don't get that 3 pieces of mail build up and a billboard on their way to driving to work and kind of casually introduce your candidate. You got one shot. You got to break through, and if you don't, you may never get another look at this voter. So even in these battleground states. Which, by the way, let me talk about another tactic that I think is really fascinating. A lot of people are saying, when Kamala Harris went to Georgia, she went to rural Georgia, and this is really smart because she's eating into these smaller margins. It is smart, but it also becomes the last opportunity for a candidate to do this too. This isn't just smart tactics. It's kind of the only way to play the cards that you've got. And again, it's a good thing. I'm not being critical. Same thing in rural Pennsylvania, that red tea, as we call it. If you're at home listening and paying really close attention and want to know more about the Keystone State than you ever did, Pennsylvania is basically this little rectangle on its side. On the lower right corner is Philadelphia, and the lower left corner is Pittsburgh, and they've got suburbs around them. If you look at what's left, it creates a T. It looks like a T in that rectangle. That's very deep ruby red rural Trump country. And one of the things that we did in 2020 effectively as a Lincoln Project, and what candidates do all the time, Democrats do, is if you're in a strong enough position, you go into that rural area to lower the margins. That's why you do it. You go in to drive down Trump, and instead of him getting 68% of the vote, maybe he gets 64% of the vote. Those margins matter when you're trying to carry a state that's significant. Same thing in Georgia. You don't go to Gwinnett and DeKalb County. You don't go to Atlanta. You go out into the northern hinterlands of Georgia to try to talk to voters that you wouldn't otherwise get. Same reason that Obama was going into the panhandle of Florida is, that's the rural red. It looks more like the South than it does South Miami, if you know what I'm saying. You do that because you're trying to lower margins. And that's this phase of the campaign. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself or lose too many folks, but you can screw that strategy up if you do it in reverse. And if you don't believe me, ask Beto O'Rourke, who spent 18 months going into rural Texas talking to people that weren't going to listen to him because they didn't want to hear from politicians. They certainly didn't want to hear from a city slicker politician like Beto O'Rourke. He should have been spending his time in blue counties. And then as it gets closer towards the end, you go in and you punch that margin a little bit, depress that vote a little bit, as we say, not suppress, depress. And you make sure that you are making yourself competitive in some of these redder or battleground states.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's something that's really different out there that's happening right now. And watching, I said this on TV the other day, always watch where they're going because it does not lie. I said this on the Abby Phillips show on CNN the other night. I was like, this is too late in the game for any of this cutesy stuff. No head nods, a head fake for you football players. Like, there's one thing that me and Mike Madrid can tell you can never, ever get back in a campaign, and that's time. Time is the most precious element. The other thing I love about campaigns is there's an ending date. It's all over at the election day. So you've only got so many days. So this, she's going to Montana, or this, she's going to be in Florida, or whatever. Like, all love to my friends in Florida, Montana. Watch where they go. There's a reason why on Labor Day, Mike, you had Walz in Milwaukee. You had the President Biden and the Vice President in Pittsburgh with 6 international union presidents at the IBEW Hall, while you had Donald Trump and JV, whatever his name is, taken off and decided not to even do anything on Labor Day. That matters. All that free press that they got in Pittsburgh. And then you want to know how big Pennsylvania is, which I think is the most important state. It was announced this morning, if not last night, that she's going to spend the next 3 days in Pittsburgh prepping for this debate. Mike, again, where you are and what you do is a telltale sign of where the hot spots are in these campaigns, right?
Yeah, there's no question. Look, Pennsylvania is the key. It's the new Florida. If Kamala Harris wins Pennsylvania, there's a 96% or 94% chance that she wins the race. If Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania, there's a 96% chance that he wins the race. The roadmap for either candidate around Pennsylvania is virtually non-existent. And, when you look at the ad spend and follow the ad spend, the 3 states, even though he's being vastly outspent in every battleground state, Donald Trump looks to be investing most heavily in Pennsylvania as his biggest state, of course. The second is Georgia, and then North Carolina. He's spending more money in North Carolina than he is in Arizona. And what that says to me is if he can win Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, he hits the 270 number there. Comes real close.
272 to be exact.
Oh,
and
okay.
I tweeted about this, which I don't tweet as much as Mike Madrid does because I have a lot more haters. Yeah. But that's the strategy, y'all. Watch where the money is. Pennsylvania is a big strategy, and that's how he can get to 272.
Yeah. So what's amazing to me, though, is, and again, this is just bad planning, bad cash flow, bad campaign management. There's no other way around it. Or he's just simply using his campaign as a grift to kind of just rip off hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. Both can be true, by the way. But the fact that he's not competing, and when I say not competing, It's not even that he's like losing slightly, or he's not even in the ball game. He's getting outspent like 8-10 to 1 in Nevada, in Arizona, Wisconsin, these states that really are very pressing for him. And I was like, okay, well, maybe that can be explained by all this independent money. But yeah, and sure, there's tens of millions of dollars coming in independently, but Kamala is matching him and exceeding him there too. So at a certain point, you've got to ask yourself, what is the strategy? What are they doing? And then, as I've always had to deal with in the Trump era, am I overthinking it? Am I giving these guys too much credit by thinking there's a strategy when usually 99 times out of 100, there ain't no strategy. They're just dumb.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something there. And I go back and forth on the same thing. I can stay ahead of a regular consultant. Like, I kind of got an idea where they're going. And sometimes these folks are so dumb, we think they're brilliant, but they're not really even, they just fell backwards into it. It's like when Mike Madrid says that a lot of times Republicans are winning a lot more bigger percentage of Latino voters in spite of themselves.
Yeah, there's no grand strategy here.
I could not agree more. I think as we kind of get towards the end of this podcast, I wanted to touch on a couple other Senate races. And those were, we have Senate races. We've talked enough about Rubin. Rubin's doing a great job in Arizona, but keep an eye on this, on the Senate race and Nevada and the presidential there. While you have, Rubin doing really great in Arizona and other things, Nevada's always lagging all these other polls, Mike. It just seems like it can't jump out there and be the D+4, the D+5. And I think, and this, I love your thoughts, but my thought is that there's so many new people that move to Nevada every 2 to 4 years. You have to go back in and do a whole new campaign with a whole new group of people where you just can't build a base. But I could be wrong about it. It's just kind of where my gut is.
No, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I will say this, you're right. Nevada always has this peculiar dynamic of polling much more conservatively than actual results. I'm waiting for the story of like Latinos are voting for the Republican, 20 days out in Nevada. That story always comes. It always happens and it never materializes, at least not at the levels that Republicans expect. I will say this about Nevada, though. It is the one state that has been moving more Republican. Of all the 7 battleground states, it is the one that is actually voting more and more Republican. Every other battleground state is moving more and more to the left. Nevada is moving more and more to the right. I'm not too sure how consequential Nevada will be. But in a race like this, you don't take anything for granted. You need absolutely every state. I am obsessively consumed by North Carolina, as we all know, because I've been saying it for so damn long. I am going to be fascinated to see if this is a competitive race in battleground states and other areas. I actually think Kamala Harris has a better chance of winning North Carolina than she does Georgia. I think she will probably do well in both. But I think that North Carolina is much, much more in play than people think that it is. And I think they're coming around to that. But Mike Madrid's been saying for a long time.
You should let me know when you go down there. Our Latina sister, Irene, down there, I was just texting with her this week. We're doing some work for her. It's groundbreaking work there with young Latinos. She has made this whole series of digital videos that look like the old school soap operas from back in the day, but telling stories of young voters and their families. It's like anytime people are doing something like this, it's really unique, especially with something like a novella. And it's really cool. We were texting this morning. I'm trying to get her some more money. But when you go down there, you should see her operation, because we will definitely need to have her on the podcast, probably as early votes start. I'd love to pick her brain with you because you're so obsessed with it and she's a dear friend. Because we want to hear what these young voters are doing is so much different than the old folks like me and Mike. Next week, we have a guest coming on who's been organizing around the country around climate, young people, the environment. And they've been doing a ton of polling, a ton of focus groups, and talking to lots of voters. I'm really interested to hear what they're hearing out there and the work that they're doing, literally in a place called Climate Power, that has built out a whole section of their work targeted on Latino families and all the things that have to do. We all know that most of our neighborhoods are closest to the transmission, closest to the dirt and the soot and all the things. But anyway, I wanted to have them on. Me and Mike talked about it this week, and I think we're going to have them on next week. I think we have that nailed down. So we have a lot of good stuff coming up. We have them next week. It made me think that I want to get Irene on here in the next couple of days. And then maybe, Mike, we could get somebody on from California or New York who's working in some of these house races where there's no presidential race up there. Is there a Latino in New York that or I know, or California?
Let's start bringing in some people from house races specifically. I think I'm going to be in North Carolina the last 2 weeks of the campaign. I'm so interested in it, and I want to do some storytelling there and kind of letting the country know what's going on with what's happening in that part of the campaign. So love to meet Irene, love to have her on the show, love to be in North Carolina with her. In the interim, we will absolutely have more guests from competitive swing seats, from competitive Senate races, and I'm sure we will have a couple of representatives from the presidential campaigns on with us to talk about the Latino vote. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great chat today. Chuck, I'm looking forward to your expanded Guayabera collection, looking for that new fashion statement you're going to be bringing out. Have a great time at the wedding. Go make some more money. Make sure they pay you in pesos. Very important.
Pesos! No peso, no say so.
And we will talk to you guys next week.